Hi, I'm Elaine Perry, Senior Educational Psychologist from the City of Wolverhampton Educational Psychology Service.
And I'm Holly Stipton, Assistant Psychologist from the City of Wolverhampton Educational Psychology Service.
And we're going to be doing a short introduction today about how you can use the PACE model to support children and young people generally, and also in the return from the partial closure of schools. And you can also share it with parents as well, because they can use it to support their children at home if they're not returning to school in the meantime. So first of all, what is PACE? PACE is a model that was created by Dan Hughes, who is a clinical psychologist. It's grounded in attachment theory, and it was designed originally for use with children who had experienced trauma and neglect and abuse. So it's really about kind of increasing feelings of security, increasing feelings of safety, and helping children to feel kind of secure and trusted. And it focuses on the strengths and positive attributes of a child. So what does PACE stand for? The P is playfulness, the A is acceptance, the C is curiosity, and the E is empathy. We'll take all of those sections in turn and kind of explain what they all mean. But it's a really simple model to be able to support children in their return to school, and generally there's a lot of information around PACE for parents, and if you kind of look up Dan Hughes, there's lots of information on his website as well. So why do we think PACE is important at the moment? Kooth is an online counselling service and support service for children and young people that's available in lots of the Midlands authorities as well as around the country. In terms of Kooth in the West Midlands have provided information about increases in demand for their services during this time. And as you can see, there's been a huge increase in demand for services around bereavement, services around kind of autism spectrum conditions, worries about school and college, and a 250% increase in the demand for help with suicidal thoughts, which is quite worrying. And I think there's lots of talk about the potential negative impacts of the coronavirus pandemic on children and young people. I think that there's been some benefits perhaps for some children and young people. So there's a lot of talk about it there being a huge mental health crisis, which I think we do need to listen to and we need to react to. But also we'll see that some children might have been positively affected. So you can see that there's been a 40% decrease in demand for support with family relationships. So some families have been able to build relationships during this time because it has given that time. But again, on the flip side, it has allowed a lot of pressure on families as well. So that's one of the reasons why we kind of want to promote PACE, and PACE does aim to help children feel secure and feel valued and feel safe. PACE is about understanding behaviour as a communication, and it's about reacting to that in a kind of nurturing way, and moving from kind of what's wrong with you to what has happened to you. So rather than looking at behaviour as being kind of a misbehaviour, it's about how do we understand that, what are they trying to communicate from that behaviour. And it, as I said, it can be used at home and at school. It's not just about changing behaviour, so I don't want you to see this as a model of behaviour management. This is almost kind of a way of being with children and young people that increases their feelings of security, and therefore will help to kind of promote positive behaviour. And well, we know that when children feel safe, when they feel secure, they are more likely to be able to respond positively and to kind of accept direction. We know that they're able to learn better when they're in that state. So it's quite a useful model just to reflect on while children are coming back from what might have been quite a traumatic time for some children. So we'll start with the playfulness aspect. So I think sometimes we can think of playfulness with quite young children, and we can build it into the curriculum when we've got children in reception and children in year one. And I think now at the moment when this is being recorded, children in reception year 1 and year 6 have gone back into school, or some of them. And I think in reception in year 1, they'll be thinking very much about playing and about the importance of play during this time. But it's also really important throughout childhood and as a young person. And we know that if you're taking kind of a playful mode of delivery, then you'll be taking that calm, relaxed, engaging way of being. It's about having fun, kind of expressing that sense of joy, having that kind of spontaneity. So not needing everything to be regimented and not needing to stick to all routines and things, but actually doing some things that's spontaneous. For example, my daughter is in year 1 and she went back to school yesterday and came home very excited that she'd watched Chicken Run. And I spoke to her teacher saying this was great. And she said she just saw them at 2 o'clock, kind of quite exhausted after the day. And she thought they just need some time. So it is about kind of being spontaneous, doing things that just respond to the needs of the children in front of you. And it can be used to diffuse conflicts as well. So, has it just skipped many slides? It has. Okay, anyway, we'll carry on. So what can we do to promote playfulness? So these are some things, and this is not, we know that teachers and people watching this video are going to be very skilled at engaging with children and young people. So this is not about saying that you're not playful with children. This is about saying just promote that and remember that that's a good thing to be. So you can use playfulness to diffuse kind of minor behaviours in the classroom. And I know from many of the children that I've worked with, that the adults that they got on with are those who are kind of fair with them, but also fun, and they respond really well to humour. And one of the children that I'm thinking of used to get into lots of conflict around uniform and around forgetting her tie and things. And I think the staff found that when they responded in a way that was playful, like, oh, have you forgotten your tie again, that kind of a light, neutral voice, non-judgmental, she was more likely to respond in a much more positive way than if it was kind of telling her off for forgetting her tie. Attachment time is one that I'll just mention, that you can, for some children, they, especially those who might seem attention seeking, you can try and build in that kind of attention time for them, and rather than seeing it as attention seeking, we can see it as attachment seeking. So perhaps children who haven't felt very safe or very secure might need that time built in for them, and if they know that it's timetabled in, so sometimes attachment time, rather than just saying I'll respond to it when I see the need, saying I will timetable it in and structure it into that child's timetable, can kind of ensure that consistency, that predictability. The child or young person will know that they're going to get that time with a trusted adult, and that time is not going to be just about kind of completing some work or finishing off some work that they've not completed. It's about something that they enjoy and focusing on something that's fun. There's, in terms of playfulness, I think we also need to be mindful that sometimes we can use humour and kind of sarcasm, but we need to do that carefully, that doesn't embarrass children, because I think we've all probably had experiences of people using humour and things, but it actually puts someone else down. So I think it's about trying to make sure that we're not over the top, and that humour is on the same level as the child, so that it's understood and shared by all. So I think I'll hand over to Felicity now, who will talk about acceptance.
So the next part of PACE is the A, which is for acceptance, and this is about accepting the child unconditionally without judgment or anything like that, because that's going to help them to feel safe and secure and have that sort of loving, trusting relationship that Elaine was just talking about building through play. It's about being accepted with their feelings and emotions, their wishes, their motivations, things like that, including their behaviour. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to give them rules and boundaries and put those limitations in, but it's making it clear that, you know, you're accepting the reasons behind the behaviour, and that the behaviour is separate to the child as a person, and talking about it in those sort of different things, so that they don't take that sort of personal feeling to it, and they can still feel accepted by you and have that trusting relationship. So through that, it means that we're being empathetic and we're accepting those things, and we're showing them that through talking to them, and perhaps other methods. Maybe we might use visuals, things like social stories and things like that, to build up that trusting, accepting relationship. It teaches them then that you're not criticising the self but the behaviour, and that can increase their understanding and their confidence. Lots of whole school approaches, which we've got on the next slide, I think, Elaine. Yeah. And help to promote this, such as things like the nurture approach, the throw approach, or the ELSA approach. And obviously during this time, we know that the whole school might look a bit different because of things being different in the classrooms and children being in different places and it being a very different way of working. So obviously it's looking at how you can adapt those things to now, which we know that as teachers and people who are watching this, you'll be very good at, and you'll have had lots of practice at, but perhaps you could set up an approach like that for your sort of school, like classroom bubble, and make sure that with those children they're getting that consistency, even if perhaps at this moment due to circumstances it's not the same for the rest of the school. As well as lots of things you can do that could be useful for both the children at home and at school. Things like checking in with emotional literacy games and activities that can easily be done through sort of your video calls, maybe through Microsoft Teams and things like that, using zones of regulations and things to do emotional check-ins, just so that the children are aware that you've got that interest in their emotions and that you're accepting of them. And it can be a lovely time to share adults' emotions and things as well, to show that sort of acceptance of, you know, everyone has feelings, everyone has emotions, and like, so do I, and give your examples, and that can open up some, especially at this time, sometimes to talk about perhaps some more complicated feelings and emotions that the children might be having. It's about using sort of proactive behaviour management and taking that step as the adult to help the children to either avoid behaviours or perhaps use coping strategies and things like that to be able to avoid reaching that level. And that applies to sort of more positive emotions as well, so helping them proactively, you know, how can we stay in that, you know, for example, if you were using the zones of regulation, how can we stay in that green zone, and helping the children to develop things to do that. And the most important things for it are about being respectful and about being patient. And as I said, it can be a really good thing to do with that communication between home and school. And as part of that as well, it's something that you could get the parents doing the same things as what the school are doing and have those open conversations. Yeah, and then I think our next one is back to you, Elaine.
Thank you. So yeah, the C in PACE stands for curiosity. And this is, yeah, it does what it says on the tin. It's about being curious about what's going on for children and young people. It's about listening to them. It's about being non-judgmental in that curiosity. So looking at kind of what's underneath the behaviour. If we've said earlier that kind of behaviour is a form of communication, and it's about reflecting on what a child is trying to tell us through their behaviour, and being curious can help with that. Curiosity can allow a child to stay engaged in a conversation. So kind of building on what Felicity has just said around acceptance, it's about kind of accepting where a child wants to take a conversation and using our curiosity and our questioning and our active listening skills to be able to allow them to develop that. I think it's quite it can be quite easy to just try and stick to our agendas and try and kind of get through the lesson content, which we need to do as well. But there's also, especially at the current time when children have had such a disruption in their lives, it's about kind of being on their level and being curious about what's going on for them. So I'll just go into a little bit more detail. So thinking of what can we do to promote curiosity. So like I've just said, be interested. There's an activity called I Wish My Teacher Knew, which I'll come on to. There's having emotional check-ins, I think if you're interested in check-ins and in kind of circle time and things, then you can speak to your educational psychologist about restorative practice. And I know many schools have had training in restorative practice, and it's being used in a lot of settings. But check-ins are a way of engaging everyone in conversation. So you can have an emotional check-in where you might say something like, if you could describe like how you're feeling with weather, then they can say kind of it might feel like a rainy day, it might feel like a bit of a cloudy day, or they might feel like it's really sunny day, and it's just kind of a playful and open way to let people give their views, and if you were doing it in kind of a circle, then you might have, especially if you're in school in bubbles, it might be a really nice activity to do, because you can sit in a circle, allow everyone to have their turn, go around. There's that acceptance, so you'd set some ground rules about kind of people being non-judgmental, people listening, and in the smaller bubbles of kind of 15 children or fewer sometimes, it will really allow for some time to develop those skills and to model that communication, that listening, that curiosity, and the questioning skills as well. So you can do emotional check-ins, but you can also just do fun check-ins as well. So things like would you rather. So I don't know, would you rather have a horse's head or sheep's feet or something? So you can have a fun check-in like that, where children, there's no pressure for them to share anything deep and meaningful. There's no pressure for them to like sometimes check-ins like what's the best thing that you've done over the weekend or something. It can lead to that one-upmanship. So you might have someone who's been to the beach, but you might have someone who's sat and been in front of the TV all day, or maybe their home circumstances aren't that great and actually it's not been a great weekend for them. So having a check-in that's a little bit distant can help to promote the children's curiosity as well, and their engagement in the session. You can have remote check-ins with pupils not attending. So for those of you who might be doing kind of remote sessions with children and young people, or having like email communication or over Microsoft Teams, I know that's being used in some schools, having little check-ins, like little questions that people can answer and get involved with, like we're doing this in our team, for example, and we've so I suppose the PACE model can be used with staff as well as children. But we're doing this with our team, that we'll have kind of at the start of the week, we've got a little chat on Microsoft Teams, and someone will suggest a question that just gets people talking. I think this week's one was, what was your favourite childhood toy? And it kind of showed the age gap, I think, in some of the team. I felt quite old when people were suggesting toys that I remember fairly recently. But that just, it's that playfulness, and it's not just about focusing on curiosity, but you can kind of broaden that out. I really like the statement, I wonder if. I think wondering questions are really, really helpful to use with children and young people. Like sometimes maybe if they can't articulate something, or if you can see that they're really frustrated about something, just saying like, I wonder if this might have happened, or I wonder if you're feeling frustrated because of this, or oh, I can see that you seem quite tense, and I wonder whether this might be happening. So reflecting those feelings and behaviours back to the child, and we'll come on to that in the next session. I know Felicity, you're talking a lot about empathy, so this relates again to empathy and promoting that emotional literacy. Being curious, it can help to kind of unravel the function of a child's behaviour as well. So trying to find out what's behind a child's behaviour, and I'll come on to that in a second. Oh, let me move on to the next slide. One activity that I mentioned was really good was I Wish My Teacher Knew, and this again has been used really successfully in schools. Perhaps when children are transitioning from one setting or one class to the next, and so at the current moment, where children might have had quite an abrupt end to to their current year group, and then they're going into a new teaching group, potentially with new staff. This could be a really nice activity to ask them to do if they're not in school currently. So for, say, secondary school pupils who might not now be in school until September, if at the earliest, really, giving them an activity to think about with their children, like, I wish my teacher knew this about me. So it can help them to think about what's important to them, what's meaningful to them, and what would they like staff to know. I suppose things like one-page profiles. So we often complete, well, we always complete one-page profiles for children with education, health and care plans, and they kind of talk about what's important to the child, what are their strengths, what things work well with that child and what things don't work that well for that child, and completing something like that. And there's actually a template for that in the transition documents that have been shared for supporting children with SEND needs and EHCPs to during transition. So there's a template in that you'll be able to access through there. That's again about that curiosity and about finding out what's important to the child, young person, and then being able to react to that and respond to that. So, and then the last thing on curiosity is in terms of thinking about what's underneath the behaviour. Lying is something that we often see, and it's a normal development. It's normal in development. I mean, we all lie as adults. Children learn to lie, but it can be concerning when children are kind of telling lots of lies. Maybe you're not really sure why they're lying. Maybe you saw them do something and then they deny it immediately, even though you have kind of evidence that you saw it. And sometimes getting into a conversation about, well, no, I saw you do that, or no, you didn't, like it just becomes it just becomes a battle without an outcome, and it doesn't lead to anything positive. Whereas this strategy, in terms of thinking what's at the heart of a lie, kind of embodies that curiosity, and it's also more likely to lead to a positive outcome. So if you notice that a child is lying lots, or you notice that they lie, just pose this question to yourself. So if the story that the child told was true, how would it impact upon the child's life? So would it mean that their behaviour was justified? Would it make them feel better? Would it make the child feel a relationship with their parent, carer, teacher is more familiar? So is it that they're lying because of something they've experienced before? And we can often see lying in children who have experienced trauma. Would the lie cause someone to rescue the child? Now I've done sessions to foster carers on lying, and this is a big issue for some children, young people in care. But the issue of kind of false allegations and things is a really difficult one for foster carers, because it can lead to very significant implications for them. But if a child is saying that something bad has happened to them, but you know that that's not true, is it that it would cause someone to come and rescue them? Is it them saying, like, almost a cry for help, really? And then there's a few other examples of other questions that you can ask to try and find out what's the bottom of the lie. And I suppose you could do that with a lot of behaviour, like have that questioning framework where you say, where you try and understand the behaviour and move on from that. And it can take away some of that frustration, because I think if you can, especially with lying, if you can see people lying and you really don't understand where that's coming from, it just becomes frustrating for all involved, and can lead to a lot of conflict between you and that child. So that's a really nice kind of framework that I think just embodies the whole curious element of PACE. So now we're going to move on to empathy. Oh, you're on mute, Felicity.
I was only saying that it was empathy that you just said anyway. So the last bit of PACE is empathy. And this is allowing the child to feel that compassion from the adults around them, and showing them that, you know, what they think and feel is important to you, as we spoke about earlier, and that you're going to be there for them with consistency and predictability, no matter how they're thinking and how they're feeling, or how they're behaving, and allowing them to through that build that trusting, safe, secure relationship with you as an adult. Normally in this training we'd play a really lovely video now, which if you wanted to look it up on YouTube is by a lady called Brené Brown, and she talks about the language of empathy. In that video she talks about 4 qualities of empathy, which is being able to see the world as the others see it, which is linking in with that curiosity from earlier, taking in that perspective of others, being non-judgmental and recognising emotions and feelings in others, and then communicating your understanding of those feelings and emotions to others. I would really recommend that video because I think it gives some really good practical examples of sort of how you can say things and it makes you think. But then active listening as well is an important part of empathy. It's being able to display to the child that you are there and you are listening to them. And as I just said about being able to communicate back that you've understood and listened, those sort of statements that let the child know that you're there in that moment with them, they're really useful there. Actively, thank you, Elaine. So what can we do to promote empathy? Obviously the most sort of obvious one is just to be compassionate, trying to be aware of sort of what Elaine said earlier about things like using humour and sarcasm, and making sure that we're just being sort of delicate and thinking about the feelings of others, of the children and things when we're using things like that, and having that time to take that understanding that we know that it's a stressful time, not just for children and young people, but for staff as well, having to get into a new way of working and a different way of doing things, and having that sort of compassion for each other as a team as well, and being there for each other and helping to sort of do the best job that you can in the unusual circumstances. There's a thing called empathic behaviour management that we're going to talk a little bit about in a minute, when we talk about how you can respond in an empathic way. And then there's approaches like emotion coaching, which you may have done some of the training that the Educational Psychology Service provides on that, but we are going to talk about that a little bit more in a second, and empathic commentary, which we're also going to go into a bit deeper. Social scenarios and comic strip conversations can be a really good tool to help promote empathy, not just for the child, but also for the adult supporting them, because it can be sometimes quite difficult to find out why children are, doing things in a certain way or behaving in a certain way, or you can't figure out why they're feeling a certain emotion. It's not automatically obvious. And going into things like that, where you've got time to go back a little bit more into depth with a specific child, that can be really, really like a useful tool. And obviously, again, it's about trying to be flexible with how you do those things, and with the children that are at home that might need that support, is it something that can be done through a video call? Is it something that you can have a conversation with parents about and try and give them the skills to be able to do things like that at home as well, so that it's having that wider impact? So as I said on the last one, we're now going to talk about a thing called empathic behaviour management, but we've decided to reframe it as responding with empathy, because it's not just something that you need to use when there's a behaviour. We can respond to a child or a young person with empathy all the time, irrelevant to what's happening, and I think that would be sort of what we'd be aiming to do. And as it says in the top one, it's sharing in the child's emotions, in that happiness, sadness, excitement, anger, but you being that sort of grounded person. So the adult would be staying calm, you'd be mirroring the emotions back to them and showing them that you're there for them and that you understand them, but in a very calm way, having that sort of conversation, that commentary about how they're thinking and feeling with them, and trying to use this as a time to get to the motivations of their emotions, and make sense of those things so that you can try and support them in the most sort of accepting way. It can help initiate repair of relationships, especially I'd imagine in sort of bubble scenarios. There's not going to perhaps be as much room to swap out staff and things like that, so it could be a really useful tool to respond with empathy to children, to try and keep those things ticking over where your normal systems might not be running the same due to different staffing and things. A lovely tool that could be quite useful, depending on obviously what your setting would be doing for children that come in, to do with bringing outside objects in, is doing some sort of attachment surrogacy, and that can be something like a toy or an object that, especially for children that have been at home for quite a while and may have be having difficulty or anxiety from separating from the home environment back into the school environment, because obviously that's going to be a big thing for quite a lot of children, and it's like just a little object that they might have that they can keep with them. It could be something like a hair tie, a wrist tie, something like that, or just a little small toy or something, even something easily cleanable, that they can use to take from the one setting to the other, so that they know that those key people are still with them, and it can be that reminder that, you know, I'm being collected at the end of the day, you know, even though I'm not at home, those people are still thinking of me, and that could be something really useful during this time, especially where children have been out of education for such a while within the school setting.
I'm just thinking about that, Felicity, and I know that there are some children that I've worked with, especially perhaps secondary age children, who they have their kind of mobile phones, and sometimes it's useful for them to check in with their parents, and so I know that we often have kind of quite strict rules on the use of phones and things in secondary schools, but sometimes it might be appropriate for some children, young people at the current time, to be able to have those check-ins, especially during the transition back, and you try and reduce the frequency of them. But yeah, if it's not possible to have kind of an object, then perhaps just a quick phone call or a check-in at some point during the day could be helpful.
As I say, yeah, it can even be something like a verbal sort of phrase or something which perhaps isn't a physical item, but, you know, maybe like something that the parent may have said to the child, which the adults in the setting can repeat through the day, just for that sort of reassurance, especially in such an unsettling time. Yeah. And that leads us on to just quickly touching on the 5 ways to wellbeing, because obviously we know that this is not a challenging time just for children and young people. You know, lots of staff might be worried about going back into school after having a lot of time at home, for various reasons, and it can be a really good time, as Elaine mentioned earlier, to use sort of the principles of the PACE model with your staff and each other as well, to make sure that, you know, you're having that supportive team, and helping your staff to feel safe and secure in the new challenges that are coming to them. So we just wanted to put up some ideas of something that you could look at deeper if you wanted to.
We've also been using this model with children and young people that we've been supporting, haven't we? Because during this time we've been offering remote support to children and young people, and it's sometimes it's quite different to some of the support that we might offer if the child was in school, because then we'd be looking at their network and how they can be supported by their network. But we were trying to empower them to say that these are things that we know have a positive impact on well-being, and how can we support you to kind of to do some of those things yourself, and so this can be kind of shared with children and young people as a really nice model. There's really good resources around 5 ways to wellbeing on the NHS website, actually. So if you looked up 5 ways to wellbeing, there's some really good resources that you can access.
And we touched a little bit on empathic commentary, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about it. It's quite a similar approach to emotion coaching, which we're also going to briefly touch on. But these can just be some really simple, quick and easy ways to help the children develop that emotional understanding, develop that emotional literacy that we were talking about earlier, and help figure out the reasons behind how they're thinking and feeling their emotions, especially at this time where it might be a little bit more complicated than normal. And there's 2 styles of empathic commentary. The first one is responsive, which is what you would be doing sort of at the time that they're displaying the emotion or the behaviour, and it should be a very short sentence, and as an example of it, the smaller bubble on the slide, which is going to be very clear and concise, and it doesn't just have to be, we really want to stress that it's not just about sort of when there's like a behaviour and negative and trying to change that. It can be addressing sort of how you develop that emotional literacy of positive emotions. So for example, this one is, it's really hard for you to sit still today, you're so excited about everything, and helping the child to have those labels and that understanding to be able to talk about the positive experiences as well. And then there's a slightly longer version of empathic commentary, which is called preventative empathic commentary, which would be used sort of when the child's feeling quite calm, and you've got that time to have a little bit more of a longer, not a conversation, but just a little bit of a longer check-in with them about it. And an example of that would be on the slide, the other one, that I'm feeling quite upset just now because you've smashed a window by kicking a ball when I told you not to. I will calm down in a while though. And as we were talking earlier, it's about using the sentences to, put those labels on and to focus on the behaviour and not the child. So you're talking about just what's happened, that emotion, that behaviour, but not doing anything that would cause them to feel judged or like it was something on their self. The next slide, please. Yeah.
I really like that one, Felicity, because I think it's kind of modelling how we aren't always calm. Because I know that that Felicity's mentioned that we should respond in a calm way, but sometimes that's not possible. Like sometimes, we are human. I don't always respond as calmly as I would like to, but I think that's okay. And I think if you have responded in a way that's not calm, it's about kind of recognizing that and saying that it normalizes those feelings as well, because sometimes I think children who do get angry a lot feel that that's wrong and that they shouldn't feel that way, but actually if you find yourself feeling a bit angry and that does come out, then just reflecting with them afterwards and saying maybe I shouldn't have reacted in that way, but it was because I was feeling like this, can really help to normalize some of those emotions.
So as we were saying, it's about demonstrating that empathy through the words, the tone of voice and the body language, and making sure that it's not judgmental. It's just simply putting those labels on to what's been happening, and as Elaine just said, about normalising those emotions and things that they might be behaving or feeling in that moment. It's really useful within these times to sort of mirror the child's facial expression back to them. So even though you're staying calm, you might be showing them on your face sort of that visual cue so they can link together how they're feeling and how they're expressing. It's really important to them to stay calm throughout, and it's a really great time to use some of those I wonder questions that Elaine was talking about earlier. Like, I can see that you're, throwing a pencil right now. I wonder if it's because, this just happened, and using those times to give them a chance to be able to correct you, because, children have got big emotions and it's quite easy for us to say, oh, they're doing that because of this. But those I wonder questions gives them that chance to take that ownership and say, well, actually, no, it's got nothing to do with that. I'm feeling upset because of this, and it gives them that chance to take that ownership of their feelings and emotions in that accepting, normalised way, and be able to have that open conversation with you. It's really important not to overcomplicate these. They need to be quite short and to the point, and use other activities. If you're seeing patterns and things like we were talking about earlier, like the emotional check-in activities and things, maybe link in your activities like that if you're starting to see patterns with a child, and avoid praising or telling off the child for how they're thinking and feeling, because we are trying to normalise those emotions, and like Elaine said, we don't want the child to feel like it's something that they shouldn't be thinking or shouldn't be feeling.
I think one of the something that always makes me smile is I remember observing a nursery group, and it's just on that point of kind of avoid praising or chastising or kind of overemphasizing something. I observed a nursery class, and they were doing kind of a check-in of how you were feeling. So they asked all the children to say how they were feeling that day, and I think the first child said they were fine, they were happy. The next child said they were sad, and they asked them why they were sad. So they kind of delved into that emotion, and then the next child said they were happy and didn't get any questions asked after that as to why they might be feeling happy. So then you had the case of all the children after that said they were feeling sad because they knew it got them more feedback, it got them more of a reaction. So I think also, like, not just kind of avoiding praising and chastising, but make sure you respond to all emotions, because I think it's quite easy to just respond to negative emotions and just say, oh, why is that, how are you feeling like that, but sometimes reflecting on happy emotions and good emotions can help as well.
Some children that I've worked with as well have found it really difficult to deal with positive emotions, dependent on sort of their experiences and things, and that can sort of cause them to go too much the other way because they can't sort of cope with you giving that sort of overt praise, and they don't know how to deal with that feeling. So that's why it's really important as well to focus on both, because not all children are going to have the same sort of needs. They're all going to have different needs and different emotions that they need to process.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we've got emotion coaching, which is our last thing that we're going to talk about with regards to empathy. We know that a lot of people might have already done some emotion coaching, touched on different courses, but we really wanted to just include the basic steps for it, because it can be such a useful tool that can be used with so many children, and across so many different ages and settings and things like that. So with our emotion coaching, we're going to be recognising, emphasising and validating the feelings and labelling them, which is quite similar to the empathic commentary, but this allows us to sort of set limits at the same time while we're talking. So we might say something like, I can see that you're getting frustrated with how difficult you're finding that question. Learning can be difficult sometimes. But then we might also add on to that it's not okay to throw your work on the floor. And then we're going to work with that child and young person on sort of next steps. What could we do next time? And how can we sort of resolve this with them? So we might say, next time, what could you do when you find a question difficult? And this is teaching the children and young people about dealing with their emotions in the moment, giving them those strategies, those coping strategies, that what can we do instead things to be able to deal with the ups and downs, which we know, in schools you're going to have lots of those strategies to hand to pull on to use with children about what we could do next time, and using those moments where a child does experience difficult emotions as opportunities for teaching, and it's going to help build that trust and respectful relationship with the child that we've been focusing on through this training.
Thank you. So just to finish, really, I didn't put this on the first slide because then you could have just turned off and not listened to us. But this is a really nice PACE poster that that's been developed, not by us, unfortunately. I would love to be this artistic. But there's at the bottom of the slide, it gives you the link to where you can download this poster from. And this might be a really nice poster to share with parents, to put on the wall in the staff room, so that you can just kind of revisit some of these aspects of PACE. And in the middle it says kind of pace yourself and help children feel secure. And I think that's what PACE really is about. It's about allowing yourself to have that playful time, to have that curious time, to be able to respond to and reflect emotions and respond with empathy, and to accept children as they are and at the point that they're at. So in the big bubble, kind of on the acceptance, it says you are loved no matter what. Your feelings aren't right or wrong, they just are. And I think it's a really powerful tool, and it's like I said at the beginning, it's a way of being. It's not a way of managing behaviour. This is about a way of supporting children, making them feel safe, making them feel secure, and helping them to trust the adults around them, which is especially important for the children that might have had a really difficult time over the last, how many months have we been in lockdown? Quite too many. But over the kind of the period of lockdown. But also for children that have had a nice time during this time, it's going to be useful for every child who comes back into your school, and it's also going to be a nice tool to share with parents who have also found some, not all parents, but some parents have found this a challenging time. I speak from experience. So yeah, thank you for listening to us. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that you found this helpful. If you do want any other information about this, then our contact details are here. Feel free to get in touch, and feel free to speak to your Link educational psychologist as well. So thank you.
Thank you.